What's happening, folks? Happy holidays! And indeed, we're going to listen to another Christmas song, and we're going to listen to a Christmas carol by an artist I've already been deep diving on, that is to say, Alison Moyet. So this actually dovetails quite nicely in that I just reacted a couple weeks ago to a Christmas carol by the Eurythmics, their version of Winter Wonderland, and in researching this Christmas carol, which is called the Coventry Carol, I found out that Alison's version of this was released on the same compilation album, which is called A Very Special Christmas, and was produced to benefit the Special Olympics. So yes, I didn't realize that when I reacted to Winter Wonderland by the Eurythmics, but it's a nice segue. And yes, I would expect this to be an English carol called the Coventry Carol. I have not heard it before, so I don't have any basis of comparison, meaning I haven't heard other renditions where I could say, oh, it's arranged differently or it's performed differently. I will say Alison's soulful vocals make me wonder whether there might be a mixture of an oldie-timey sound that you perhaps would expect with an English carol. Fair to say some of my favorite carols are English Christmas carols, like Past 3 O'Clock or God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen or Ding Dong Merrily on High. So yes, I would expect maybe a mixture of an old-time sound with a more modern, soulful sound, given that a lot of Alison's songs since the early days of electronic synth-pop with Vince as Yazoo were much more natural instrument-based, much more soulful or even jazzy. So yes, I would expect maybe a mixture of old and more modern sounds, or it could just be done in a very traditional style. I guess we'll find out. Let's listen. This is Alison Moyet and her performance of the Coventry Carol, which is included on a very special Christmas album, and that's actually the name, which again was produced in support of the Special Olympics.
Little tiny child, bye bye luli luli. Oh sisters too, how may we do for to preserve this day, this poor youngling for whom we do sing, bye bye luli luli. Herod the king in his raging charged he hath this day his men of might in his own sight, all young children to slay. That woe is me, poor child, for thee, and ever morn and day, for thy parting neither say nor sing, bye bye luli luli. Thou little tiny child, bye bye luli luli.
fading out, when she started to air out some very emphatic and sonorous vocals, I feel like that was a very inopportune time to fade. Yes, doing some vocal inflections of depth and emotional significance. So yes, I would say it was a mixture, but not in terms of having a half olden sound in general and a half modern sound. It was like her vocals and the lyrics, where I think chargeth was in there and thee was in there, which is obviously older style English phrasing, but her delivery was more traditional and classic for a carol, but at least until the very end, where again she's let the soul come out a little bit as they were fading. But the sonics were more modern, like 80s keyboard sounding, so the arrangement kind of had a modern synth down-tempo jazzy feel, but the vocals had a traditional carol choral feel, and it sounded like we had tripled or maybe quadrupled Alison voices, so it sounded like a choir of her voice, not just the singular voice in the middle, which really stood out in that point near the end where it became a cappella for a couple bars. So yeah, a very compelling carol, which seemed to mix an older vocal approach with a more modernized keyboard-driven arrangement. So I like how it was sort of what I was thinking in advance, but on a different dimension or in a different facet or way. So yeah, again, her voice is magical and deep, and this carol has moments where you can feel that low, rich resonance, although not the belting that we know from Alison in some of her own tunes. So yeah, curious about this carol, where it comes from. Given the phrasing of some of the lines, I would expect it at least goes back to the 19th century, if not earlier, which I suppose a lot of what we now regard as old time, no one knows who actually wrote it, it comes from like folk traditions. A lot of those carols actually are 19th century, because before that, in a lot of places, celebrating Christmas wasn't what it became, which, in part is related to Charles Dickens and his attempt to popularize Christmas as a celebratory holiday throughout the UK or Great Britain at the time. So yes, it's an interesting thing now to think about classic carols at the time they emerged and became more public entities being novel and something new, whereas now we take them as these carried on traditions. But ultimately, I like the way it blends a bit of her own soulful flavor from her music with that traditional choral sound. So, poof, and I'm back. So I was curious enough about the Coventry Carol that I decided to look it up after shooting this reaction, and what I discovered is this actually goes back to the 16th century, with the earliest text of the Coventry Carol being recorded in the 1530s, and the earliest writing of the melody happening a few decades later toward the end of the century. But as I mentioned, a number of famous carols go back to the 19th century and are themselves quite old, but this one is much older still and can be regarded as a medieval carol. And I guess it was part of a cycle, a pageantry. It was part of some type of performance that occurred in a sequence. So yes, obviously this is a much older carol than I realized, and the traditional sound of Alison's vocal delivery and the phrasing of some of the words are indeed much older than many other carols which remain part of the modern association of Christmas music. So yeah, I found that very cool and interesting enough that I had to come back and shoot the add-on. In any case, let me know what you think of this, and I will see you next time. Peace.